everyone. Welcome to Risk Roundup. From the revolution in personal computers to the information communication and digitization technologies that helped us all to have faster access to information and communication than ever before, we are now witnessing the rise of artificial intelligence that is fundamentally transforming the very meaning of intelligence. So as we evaluate, the industries across nations undergo a profound and lasting shift in the relative balance of power of intelligence. The application and adoption of artificial intelligence will offer each business as many opportunities as it does challenges. The artificial intelligence capability is revolutionizing every aspect of business and commerce. It has leveled the playing field and brought everyone a unique possibility of progress. What needs to be seen is whether in the level playing field, who will be able to compete and lay a new foundation for lasting prosperity and who will decline. To discuss how artificial intelligence is transforming business further, I'm delighted to welcome Eric Daimler to Risk Roundup. Eric is an authority in artificial intelligence and is currently the CEO of Spinglass and sits on the board of Petuum Inc. Before that, he was the White House Fellow for Machine Learning and Robotics under the Obama administration. He is based in the United States. Welcome, Eric. We are so very honored to have you on Risk Roundup.
Good to be here, Dr. Pandya.
Wonderful, Eric. So today, what is common to all businesses is access to technology and information. But what is not common is how each individual business uses that information for what purpose and goals. While artificial intelligence has given businesses across industries and nations the same starting point in access to AI technology, data, and information, what are the parameters that will define their individual success?
I really think we're going to enter a new wave of AI where we had previously been fascinated with learning algorithms that I'd researched with colleagues, and we have some notable successes from that, from me and colleagues in other groups. You know, the most popular among them, the one that hasn't even reached the public imagination, is deep learning. But those learning algorithms, I think, are limited by the industry expertise that's brought to bear on these problems. And I think that's really the next wave of AI, is an appreciation and then an application of this rich sort of earned industry expertise on all manner of business problems in conjunction with the applications of the learning algorithms.
Yes, that's a very good, analysis that you gave, and the industry expertise. I think that is at the heart of the whole revolution that is going on. Because while there are businesses, in each industry across nations, not all businesses and not all industries across nations, they have the same level or depth of, understanding or the expertise. And also, of course, the resources, who has that kind of resources that would allow them to go through, deep learning algorithms, because it requires a huge amount of expertise. So businesses across nations are expected to face these extraordinary challenges and changes in the coming years, with automation-driven growth as the only constant in those changes. Now, in artificial intelligence-driven automation, growth means, irrespective of whether that is machine learning or deep learning, growth means more intelligence from the data and information, from connected devices, from data opportunities and risks. So that individual, the proprietary data or the big data or the social data, any kind of data they have, what access to. So the emerging trends in the AI-driven automation reflects significant shifts of players and actions in the AI sphere that reveal the reconfiguration of interest and influence and investments in the AI domain of global business, politics, and power play. So from your assessment, what shifts do you see in the businesses across nations that you find it troubling, or you find it welcoming that, these advances are coming towards us?
IBM says that half of all AI projects fail. half. That's really quite something. And we see some pressure from the board level about implementing AI in some capacity. A week doesn't go by where I don't get a call from some kind of board level participant wanting to know that a large company is addressing AI properly. Yet these projects fail, and they fail for a variety of reasons. But one is that there's a lack of understanding really about what AI is beyond these precise learning algorithms. So me and people like me have developed these precise tools for automation, but to put them into use, we need to work in collaboration, work shoulder to shoulder with somebody that has worked in an industry and understands the nomenclature, understands the ontology, if you will, what we would call it, for a particular group. So, for example, we were looking at some pharmaceutical companies who have a vast database of old drug tests that they would love to bring to bear on inventing new drugs. And we as citizens would also like them to do that and synthetically instead of doing human tests as a first test. But merging those databases is non-trivial, and it's technically a big deal, to be sure. The data integration, data migration, it consumes 40% of the global IT budget. But the understanding of what's involved in these drug tests can't fall to some technologist, some computer scientist like myself. If you have one drug database that said, smoking, yes, no. Another said, smoking, how long ago? Another said, smoking, how much? You can't, in the words of these database projects, normalize that data, because then you'd lose the fidelity, you'd lose the nuance that might actually be critical to measuring the proper outcomes of the drugs. And in that case, it's literally life and death. We can afford to have failures in AI projects that might deal with digital advertising, for example, but we can't afford to have failures in many other projects. Aerospace, you don't want your jetliners to have trial and error. Pharmaceuticals, you don't want to have trial and error. Even things like natural gas exploration, energy exploration more generally, you don't want to have trial and error. These have to be done very precisely. And the board can't really get a grasp on the whole system that's necessary to be deployed and the resources required and even the time that they should be dedicating and thinking about consideration of AI as a whole system, inputting of the data, the sensing of the data perhaps before that, and then the planning and the computation interacting with the whole infrastructure of compute before we then interpret the outcome. That whole system needs to be part of the sensibility at the board level, at the organization level, and needs to filter down to give comfort to those actually implementing these AI projects.
No, that's an excellent, analysis that you give, because when so many projects, almost half of them fail, then, it brings a question that who is driving these projects? Is it the AI engineers that are driving this project, or the business, is driving the project? Who has understanding? So, and the data challenges that you said about the integration and collaboration, those are, very big challenges, because first of all, industries rarely, work together as, collaborative. Everybody, the competition still persists, right? It's a competitive capitalist system. So everyone is trying to beat the other businesses and try to be ahead. So for them to work together, to use everybody's data sets together, to collaborate, to integrate, that itself is a huge challenge. And on top of it, who is driving? How much understanding is what vision? What problem you are trying to solve? it's not just about having data and creating algorithm, but what problem you are trying to solve. So there is a lot that, beginning from the board level, the executives need to, understand and drive. So businesses are beginning to understand the implications of this evolving artificial intelligence driven automation ecosystem far beyond this, narrow artificial intelligence, and that crosses the economic, commerce, and governance and trade supply chain, because everything is getting impacted. So while the relationship between the businesses and automation is complicated and at times indirect, the force and pace of this AI driven automation change is expected, in the coming years, and it is going to present each industry a lot of challenges and opportunities for its businesses and products and services and the supply chain. So you mentioned, a good example of pharmaceutical industry. Which other industries do you see that is working at an industry level, to integrate and collaborate on their data, basis, so that, they can come with the solutions that overall broadly the industries are, facing?
There's a lot of opportunities here, but you brought up a really great point that's really worth expanding on, which is the degree of social interaction required more generally across the organization. So when during the Obama White House, I had the good fortune of looking at my peers, other AI robotics experts in other domains of the United States federal government. So it would be the State Department, the Defense Department, the Energy Department, the Health and Human Services Department, Transportation, and so forth. And we tried starting at the most basic level. What is the definition of a robot? What is the definition of artificial intelligence? And I found after some period of time that we couldn't come to a really clean understanding, common understanding, and for good reason. The Defense Department's probably the easiest one to distinguish as a standout. The uses of their robots are completely different than serving a retired community, as Health and Human Services might, or the Department of Labor might have completely different applications than the Department of Defense. So their very definition of what a robot and what an AI is should be respected. And that sometimes heavy-handed approach by a large organization to try to force some commonality of understanding may also delay the result of your AI projects or diminish the result of your AI projects. So the future is in those technologies that allow for collaboration, that allow for some degree of integration, but respects the ontology, again, the nomenclature, the sensibilities of one group or another. That can take place in software where every team can think that their particular expertise and their particular job isn't threatened. And that really does have an impact in the success rate of these AI projects, because we have to start with integrated data. On your other question, what are the big leverage points? What are the other industries that really are going to benefit from applications of AI? We can really look at any industry, but the one that currently has my attention is in the industrial supply chain. So, the reason that some companies like Amazon here in the United States is very powerful is because they provide a service linking suppliers and buyers fundamentally. And if you go into the physical supply chain, the industrial supply chain, you find that there's a huge friction in onboarding new suppliers. The research says that it takes 6 months and 125 different tasks to consider a new supplier. Now that will diminish any particular company's ability to gain visibility into future market forces and consider other alternatives, whether I want to plan on particular growth in buying new machinery, or I just want to be distributing and my supplier base and reducing my risks. That friction is today is very high. We talked to a mid-level trucking company who has 10% of their staff dedicated to information technology professionals. It's just a ridiculous allocation of resources for a trucking company. So that degree of inefficiency was one of the motivations behind the United States Department of Commerce's funding of some exciting software projects to address this issue. And I think that's going to provide a really nice next wave of ideas and next wave of opportunity globally as we bring an efficiency of the industrial supply chain to be closer to the efficiency we see in the digital supply chain.
Yes, no, I think that's an excellent point. And the first point that you made about the nomenclature, what is AI? I mean, that you are the second person this week who, I was talking to someone from Homeland Security yesterday, and they also mentioned the same thing that there is so much misunderstanding about what exactly is AI. I mean, should we even name it as AI, or whether it's cognitive systems or learning systems? So that is a whole topic of another discussion. But yes, that needs to be addressed. What exactly is that we are trying to do by using this evolution in intelligence, these learning systems? And the whole reason why we are creating this entirely new intelligent species is for solving the big problems facing humanity. So if we want to solve all those big problems facing humanity for the future of humanity, then we all need to come together and work. There should not be that many silo efforts of each nation working on solving industry problem at their just a national level or even local level. We all need to come together, collaborate, and share the data or integrate the data so that we have more information, we have more intelligence, and we can solve the bigger problems that is coming towards us. Because if we don't work together, collaborate, cooperate, then we are just going to weaponize these algorithms, and that's going to bring a whole different level of challenge, and we don't want to go there. So from you in the beginning, you mentioned that you're working on some sort of putting together guidelines or structure to these algorithms, or how we should go forward with this AI, development, and implementation, or deploy. I mean, design, define, and develop. So, from your assessment, how should any industry evaluate first of all and prepare for the impact of AI, and then define and design the solutions that would help the entire industry?
Yeah, the first place to look when implementing an AI solution is defining what job you want to automate. And you have to define that in really precise terms. And so to use an alliteration, you can't automate what you can't articulate. You need to be very formal, pretty rigorous, maybe even pedantic about enumerating the particular steps of a job and how you want to potentially automate that job. I was at a dinner last week with a senior government official in London, and I had the good fortune of having a robust discussion with a really intelligent, experienced group about these subjects. And we started actually with AI. What is AI? Because people will talk about it in a range of ways, and sometimes it'll just come up with this Hollywood narrative of a dystopia or potentially, hopefully, utopia. And I think those are a type of a lazy thinking when we go to one of those other extremes. And I'd like to be a little more nuanced, and that's what I offered to the people at our dinner. And I introduced the definition that I think works for most of us. It's not precise, or rather, it's not accurate in the way that we've come to understand it as an AI researcher. Well, we'll see they are learning algorithms, and machine learning is a subset of AI, and deep learning is a subset of machine learning, and then therefore there are non-machine learning AIs. That is true, but it doesn't really provide much value to the 99% of us that are not AI researchers. So the definition, I think, really that allows us to get a handle on AI, to find a place to grab on, is defining AI as a system, as a whole system, from the sensing, the collection of the data in whatever manner those sensors take place. It could be a sensor about the physical world. It could be a sensor that just is scraping the web for whatever data. So you're sensing, you're collecting the data. You might be using edge computing. To then going to the planning, the networking, the storage, the computation, then the learning algorithms that then are used in application of that data, that provably integrated data. To then the outcome. Does this outcome make sense? What do I actually want to execute based on the findings of my data? It's not always obvious. And you certainly want to make sure that the output reflects the values of your firm, or us as citizens, reflects the value of society before we actually go implement the outcomes, and not just trust that every machine produced result is the accurate one, or the one that made a lot of sense. So that whole system, sense, plan, and then act, I think gives you a much better picture of how to formulate a thinking in a big organization, even as in society, about how we can work to implement AI problems, and how we can even work to interject into some of the problems that may be created by AI, such as the fear of displacement, or the abrupt reconfiguration of jobs, which certainly rightfully has many people concerned.
Yes, no, of course. I mean, job is a concern to everyone, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a job, you don't have income, and how are you going to support your loved ones? So that is, big challenge, and that's a topic for another discussion. But what I would like to, discuss here is that these AI algorithms are all transparent, invisible. I mean, we cannot see that. We don't know what is coded in that, and we don't know what kind of weaponization, happens. I mean, there is no system. Nations have not even agreed, I mean, come together to define or design how to regulate this. I mean, there are efforts, of putting together, ethics guidelines and, those things, but providing ethics guidelines is not going to solve any problem, because how would you can tell every human being in the world that you have to live like this, but there are still a lot of criminals that come out. I mean, schools teaches the ethics to everyone, but it's still, we cannot control that. So even if we put together ethics guidelines, how are we going to enforce that? The security, ethics is one thing, but security is entirely another thing. How will we know what is coded in the algorithms, and how would we know what is weaponized? And when there is so much distrust, fear is one, definitely there, lot of people are fearful about what is coming their way. But when there is so much distrust, even between nations, how are we going to come together to come up with effective security guidelines? We have, risk group has just recently proposed, and we have published on how to put together the naming, and for these algorithms, and how to come up with how we can go forward with the security of the algorithms, and how we can have a framework for that. So we have published that, but the challenge is that this is a big problem, and we just don't know what is going to be coded, and who is controlling, who is accountable for what the implications are. And while AI is rapidly becoming a fact of daily life, I mean, overnight, this is interactions in these in artificial intelligence, and the geopolitics and weaponization is fundamentally transforming everything. I mean, do you see that the disturbance that is coming our way because of the weaponization of artificial intelligence? I mean, as you see, the deepfake videos, I mean, this is just the beginning. What could happen? It will be the boundaries between truth and, reality, fake or, real is just blurring. We will reach probably a point where we will not know what is, being published is whether that is real or not. So how do you see this disturbance that is coming our way impacting the AI adaptation by businesses? Because there will be a lot of accountability issues, right? I mean, even the business board or decision makers will have no idea of what their own algorithm, is designed to do.
It was really a lot of great material in what you said to work on, and I think that the weaponization of AI is one thing, but I think we might even characterize that just more broadly. It's a lack of understanding of AI, or a fear of AI, in whatever expression it takes to get people fearful. The concern I have is a resistance to AI. And we can't really afford to have a resistance to AI because in many cases it will literally save lives. The telegenic way we see it is in reducing traffic fatalities or deaths just by motor vehicles, which is a top 10 cause of death globally, being hit by and being killed by motor vehicles. So this literally is like an issue of life or death for the application of AI. We have to increase agricultural productivity, literally, to continue to feed a growing population on the planet. So we have to embrace. We cannot afford to resist the implementation of many of these technologies, and that's what I get concerned about in a range of applications. Weaponization just being one. The understanding of AI, I think, in the future, and we begin to see a little bit of this, I think will be expressed with AI for AI. You're actually going to have to develop tools that help you navigate some uninterpretable consequences from these complex systems. So there's a terrific firm I'm a fan of that looks at edge cases for these complex systems. So they'll use AI for these large AI systems. You know, you and I can't test all the possible outcomes of a motor vehicle that's newly being tested, for example. And when we're talking about autonomous vehicles, these will fail in ways that we don't understand. You know, we naturally, maybe perhaps instinctively, perhaps by training, come to understand the possible actions and the limitations of actions of a human being. So if we see a human coming down a path at us in a motor vehicle or not, we can generally understand if they're a threat or not a threat, if they're safe, or generally should I be concerned. Autonomous vehicles, or really autonomous machines of any kind, will fail, but they'll fail in different ways. And so to test those, we can't rely on these, million-kilometer tests that we've done in the past. They have to have different sort of tests. And this company, EdgeCase, uses AI to explore those boundary conditions that probably even a billion-kilometer test wouldn't be able to satisfy. So when we talk about deep fakes, whether it's in video or audio, or we talk about the manipulation of news, as we in the United States have experienced and in a couple of election cycles, and Europe is now confronting, and they're wargaming against this, that we will be developing AI tools to help us then detect whether something is real or not. So it's AI for AI. That's going to be a new trend in technology. In the other domain, when we talk about trust and talk about building for trust, we might say even engineering for trust should become a sensibility, if it's not already in many schools, for engineers. How do I bring in trust? How do I have that trust to just be part of the natural interface? When personal computers came out of the back office into our individual desks in the late 70s, early 80s, the graphical user interface from the Macintosh was thought to be a toy. It was thought to be just a plaything, not for serious work. But our thinking around this has evolved such that human-computer interaction is now a formal discipline inside of computer science departments of major research institutions globally. Designers are now part of the firmament of a venture capital investment firm, just something you would deploy, alongside any other operational executive. And I think that sort of sensibility around human-computer interaction applied to artificial intelligence and some of these new technologies that may make us uncomfortable is another emerging trend. So I'll tell you the one path down which I'm going is in cooperation with this fantastic think tank in Washington, D.C., the Halcyon House. We are going to be rolling out later in 2019 a set of principles around which I think a larger group of our society can orient themselves. We have, to your point, a set of principles that large companies have put out, and every several weeks or so here in San Francisco, where I am, I will get an invitation to participate in some discussion or another sharing thoughts about best practices in implementing AI for large companies. And to the credit of the large companies around the area in which I live, we are sharing best practices. We often will have some sort of chief ethicist at these various companies trying to, we'll say, compare notes. But you've read these forms, and I don't trust them. I doubt you do. I think actually one of the reasons we don't trust them is because we actually don't understand what some of these terms mean. Even what do you mean by privacy? What are the standards you're holding yourselves on privacy? And another thing is, how is our understanding of this technology in 2019 different from how we understood it in 2016? Therefore, how will it be different in 2021? It'll be very different. It'll be very different. We should respect that temporal fluctuation or that temporal evolution. Another is we should also respect the industry divergence of these values, or at least the prioritization of these values. If for a large internet advertising company, you and I would very much be concerned about privacy, data security, protecting the dignity of my own digital identity. I'm not so concerned about safety because there's nothing in digital advertising per se that's going to kill me. But in an aerospace manufacturer, it's flipped. I'm really not quite so concerned about data privacy and data security. Just do what you need to do to keep me safe. So the industry differentiations should be also respected when we think about these high level principles, if you will. And then at the very lowest interaction with AI is as individuals, and whether we're at the board level or we're at the individual contributor level, or whether we're somewhere in between, middle management, senior management, or just starting as a manager, we need to link that level of understanding to the corporate principles. And I think this can be done with a great deal of cooperation, because you see some companies actually calling for regulation to some extent. This is because they want to orient around a set of standards that people generally understand. What companies need is they need predictability more than anything else. And to link the sensibilities for the targets set by the company to the understanding at an individual level, at whatever level they're interacting, is an innovation I think the Halcyon House has properly pursued. And I'm really excited about the launch they'll have later in 2019, announcing this broader initiative, linking these sensibilities of the corporate goals, distinguished by time, distinguished by industry, distinguished by understanding of the internet or an AI, to individual expressions and individual understandings that can be a bridge then for any corporate implementation of AI in the world.
Well, let's hope so, because there is no way that anybody would promote. At least I would not promote that. Let's stop the progress and development of this, developing this artificial intelligence, so to say. It is not about that, but at the same time, we need to have parallel developments of how to be accountable, how to make sure, especially when you see that weaponization is already ongoing and there is a whole new industry emerging for, the cybersecurity, the hackers. It's an industry now, because so many young people find it very thrilling to be able to infiltrate, corporate systems and, government systems. So when there is, this is done at an industry level, crime has become so glorified, then it's very difficult, because then the next step is that AI is going to be, AI weaponization is going to be glorified without understanding the consequences of where it could take us. And everything is connected now. IoT has connected all of us. So yes, the definition of privacy is changing. The understanding of privacy is changing. But because now we are going towards smart, meters, smart grid, smart cities, and some smart autonomous weapons, as well as the smart, all kinds of initiatives, that everything is connected now. IoTs in millions, are connecting each one of us to everything around us, smart homes and everything. So yes, our safety and security is, now at risk. And that is a cause of great concern, because this AI, the technology is now taking us out of this two-dimensional form from and IoT integration is now allowing it to develop environments where users can interact. And the yes, we can use AI for offense as well as defense. It is changing the whole dynamics because now a common man is involved here. It's not a warfare between the militaries or the nation states. It is warfare that is targeting everyone, individuals as well as entities across nations. It's government, industries, organizations, and academia. So everything is at risk. So how do you see this changing the emerging business parameters and applications as we try to go forward on this AI journey?
One of the scary things about AI is that we can, in many ways, see the future, right? Especially with autonomous vehicles, it's pretty easy to say, "Wow, we're going to have autonomous vehicles," and then let our imaginations run wild and all the bad things that could possibly happen. We can do the same thing with video manipulations or audio manipulations or any other ranges of manipulations of our behavior. But there's the saying we have in the investment community, which is don't confuse a clear vision for a short time horizon. The manifestations of awfulness, won't all come in the next 6 months, and it's really important that we engage in the conversation of AI. And this is why I am so passionate about having a definition to start with of AI that allows people to be proactive in their engagement, not just reactive. I don't want to just wait for some large internet behemoth to come up with AI principles or do something badly and then protest against them or react against them or tell them how awful they are. I want to find a place to engage. What's my place as a citizen in the evolution of AI? We have a historical precedent for this with other machines. The automobile is a really great example of this. It wasn't just one country that decided brake lights were a really good idea. It became a global standard. And brake lights were not part of the first automobile. Headlights were not part of the very first automobile. Turn signals were definitely not part of any automobile for quite some time, and the third brake light was added later. We've come as a society to realize that we needed some sort of signaling mechanism around this multi-ton hunk of steel rolling down, with some degree of velocity in places people walk. So we've had a conversation around safety, and I think we are in that discussion today, and it's really important to include a diversity of thought, a diversity of voices globally about how to frame this new technology so that everybody can embrace its adoption. And yeah, there are certainly some scary outcomes. One of the really scary things about this technology relative to others is just the nature of digital technologies itself, is that once something works, it scales infinitely, and the change was abrupt. We just don't see it coming. It just happens, and it happens as if it always already existed. Once the smartphone was invented, once it came out into our world, nothing else existed. It just diminished the value of everything else with a speed that transformed that industry, obviously. And here's a critical issue about our ability to predict these things. In an abstract way, everybody could have predicted some form of Star Trek transmitter being held up to their face and being able to talk on it. Everybody can imagine in a general way what would happen, but nobody actually predicted the iPhone. Nobody would know the form it would take. And if somebody is so brave to think that they did predict that, we can go further and say, you certainly weren't able to predict the App Store, right? You wouldn't have been able to give advice to your children or your relatives to consider a career as an app developer in 2004. Right? It just wasn't in our imagination. So we need to be engaged in this conversation so that everybody participates in what form these technologies take, because once we develop an infrastructure, it's really hard to change it, to undo it. The form of automobile safety devices, the form of the infrastructure in cities, once it's in place, it's there for a while. And so our laws and regulations globally, we need to be very careful about. and thoughtful about and engaged with all of our society about what guardrails we want to be in place. And that's why I think about the certification. That's why I think about linking sensibilities between the company and the individual, and individuals becoming a bridge in implementation. And that's why I think of the very definition of AI being a whole system: sense, plan, and act.
Yes, I hope so that that works, because we do need the artificial intelligence. We do need the robots that are embedded with artificial general intelligence to go beyond our Earth and explore the universe, and get us all the intelligence that we need, or get us help in establishing space colonies, and doing asteroid mining, and exploring the universe where there are habitable planets, or if there are not, then then creating the environments where humans can survive. So yes, we do need beyond Earth. We do need the applications of artificial general intelligence to help us what we need for the future of humanity. So yes, absolutely, this is not about getting fearful about it, but we do need to be mindful about where things could go wrong, and we have to make sure that it doesn't go wrong, because the implications are huge, and we have to make sure that the young generation don't get very thrilled about causing damage. Rather, they should be, their intelligence, their brilliance should be diverted towards developing applications for the future of humanity, for solving problems. And I hope that we are all collectively able to convey that message to the young generation, that there is so much that you can contribute for the future of humanity, rather than just hacking someone, or rather than creating algorithm that will destroy something. So having said that, what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners, especially about your new initiatives or books that you have written that are going to be coming in near future?
Yeah. Well, so in addition to my board service on Wellways Medical and on Petuum, the technology and the company that really has my attention is this new wave of data integration, data migration. It represents, as we said earlier in our discussion, 40% of the global IT budget. There is no AI without integrated data, without massive amounts of integrated data, right? That's really what powers AI. You and I are going to have 5G devices in what, a year, 2 years, 3 years, very soon. And do we think there's going to be more data or less data with these 5G devices? More data, right? It's a rhetorical question. And if we have trouble dealing with this data deluge today, how are we ever going to be able to deal with this data deluge coming with 5G? The technology is breaking today and being able to handle this massive amount of data. We're working with a very large ride-sharing company that has had over 1 billion rides, and discovers their graph database upon which they're storing all this data is at the breaking point today, and so is jointly advocating our technology to the Apache Foundation as part of their stack for setting a standard of new graph databases. That's really where we're going, is this technology is just so exciting in being able to power all of these AI projects by being able to bring massive new amounts of provably integrated data that's integrated while guaranteeing model integrity and data integrity. And that's just not possible any other way. The adjunct to that is I am in the process of writing with a major publisher a playbook on AI. It should be out sometime next year. We're targeting sometime around the U.S. election, of course, which would be a good time because AI is going to probably be part of that discussion. And that the playbook on AI in this particular case is completely consistent with the conversation you and I are having here, which is, how do we actually grab hold of AI and participate in this? There's a lot of excellent books on AI, but what I think it needs to still be done is describe how individuals can participate and not just get scared. A lot of people know, in a general sense, what AI is. They may know how it's going to affect their lives in a general sense, but they really may not know what to do about it on a Monday morning. And that's really what the book is intended to address.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you are right, the data integration is going to be fundamental in the coming years. We do need to have that collective data data sets so that we can create more intelligence, we can understand the patterns, we can get a lot of intelligence out of it. So having said that, thank you so much, Eric, for participating in Risk Roundup today. We appreciate your thoughtful insight on AI for business, and of course we discussed much more than business, and the trends and the weaponization and all that. So our global viewers and listeners will benefit tremendously from the information you provided today. And even if a single decision maker can understand the complex challenges emerging from the AI transformation, and they are able to overcome that and see the value in data integration, working together, and all that. After listening to this discussion, this Risk Roundup dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that.
It's good to be here, Dr. Panda.
Wonderful. So Risk Roundup, a global initiative launched by Risk Group, is a security risk reporting for risk emerging from existing and emerging technologies, technology convergence, and transformation happening across cyberspace, aquaspace, geospace, and space. We at Risk Group believe that risk management, security, and peace, they walk together hand in hand. Though security is related to the management of threats and peace to the management of conflicts, risk management is related to management of security vulnerabilities as well as management of conflict. And it is not possible to conceive any one of the three without the existence of the other two. All three concepts feed into each other. We believe that the security we build for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secure for everyone across nations. Tradition becomes our security. So if we create a culture of managing risk effectively, it will lead us to security, and security will lead us to peace. Let's manage the existing and emerging risks together. For more information on the Risk Roundups, to watch the Risk Roundup video audio podcast, please go to riskgroupllc.com, and do not forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, I'm Jayshree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.